Yes, guys, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to this afternoon's live stream. With the transfer window opening imminently, a lot of rumours are heating up and there's going to be some top players across the continent who are going to be potentially coming to the Premier League. So I'm delighted this afternoon to be joined by Football Daily's Dougie Critchley. Dougie, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate you coming on. There's certainly lots of top talent across Europe and in the top 5 leagues. And that undoubtedly leads to interest from the Premier League and the top clubs. So let's get right into it then. A lot of players could be on the move. I kind of picked 4 or 5 that seemingly kind of linked the most with moves to the Premier League. Let's start with Gianluca Scamacca, Sassuolo, centre-forward, Italian international, 23 years of age, 16 Serie A goals this season just gone. He's been linked with Arsenal, linked with Newcastle, potentially. I mean, if Romelu Lukaku moves on, as a Chelsea fan, I wouldn't be totally against Scamacca coming in. He's sort of, I mean, I've watched a few clips of him this season. He looks a little bit like Giroud in sense of maybe, you know, his hold-up play, etc., things like that. How impressed have you been by him? And do you think that, you know, a move to the Premier League would suit him, or is it too early this summer?
Yeah, I think I've been hugely impressed by him. I think, the goals speak for itself. I think only 4 or 5 players topped his tally in Serie A last year. He's 6'5". He's a physical specimen, as you say. He scored some sensational long-range efforts this season. I would be slightly concerned, given that this is his first year performing at this level, that this move might come a little bit early for him. He's got an interesting backstory, actually. I think he was in the Roma Academy, then the Lazio Academy, then the PSV Academy, and then did a series of loans and never got into double figures for league goals prior to this season. But yeah, playing, you know, in a very exciting Sassuolo attack alongside Domenico Berardi and Raspadori as well, with Maxime Lopez pulling the strings in midfield. They were thrilling once again, Sassuolo, despite having a slightly disappointing points tally compared to previous years. And they only finished 11th. But this is a side that have managed to really establish themselves as a mid-table Serie A side, having been in the doldrums not too long ago, really. They're in Serie C and then Serie B for a number of years as well. So he's been a key part of Sassuolo continuing to build on that development in Serie A. But none of his numbers are truly exceptional right now from a stats point of view. But I've got to say, all the people that I follow that are big Serie A enthusiasts on Twitter that watch Sassuolo on a weekly basis do say he is a real deal and a really exciting prospect. I know there's interest from Inter Milan as well, which might make it a little bit trickier for any Premier League move this summer, given that they'll probably be looking to replace Edin Dzeko, who's actually done surprisingly well on the back of a free transfer last summer. But they will be looking for that long-term Dzeko replacement. But yeah, as you say, now an Italian regular, part of that new generation of forward that they're trying to bring through, as Insigne and Immobile slightly get moved on. And yeah, the future seems very bright for him. But I'd just be slightly worried about his lack of experience and the fact he was running a little bit hot last year in Serie A as well. I think it was 11 expected goals and he finished with 16, which either shows he's a phenomenal finisher, sort of Cristiano Ronaldo-esque, or that will probably drop down next year to a more respectable tally. So I'd be a little bit wary about spending huge money on him, but I think he could be worth a look at for around £30 million probably.
Do you think he's got, lastly on him, do you think he's got the skill set to succeed in the Premier League? Because, you know, we often see strikers come from Serie A and it's very mixed. Obviously, myself being a Chelsea fan, was thinking Lukaku might come in, score loads of goals. He was thriving in Serie A. Come back to the Premier League hasn't quite happened. We have seen mixed reports from, you know, success from Serie A to Premier League. Do you think if he were to get a move this summer, has he got the attributes to succeed?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, Charlie, and one that you can never be 100% sure on. I think the standard of Serie A defending is actually quite a long way below the Premier League and where it was, you know, 20 years ago. Obviously, it was a league built off its reputation for outstanding centre-backs. I don't think there are that many in Serie A right now. Even players like Matthias de Ligt have sort of struggled to really kick on from their Ajax peak. You've got players like Bonucci, Chiellini playing big parts at Juve still. Aside from Inter Milan, who have, you know, Bastoni, De Vrij, Skriniar, and Milan, who've got Tomori, who looks like one of the best defenders in Serie A and in Europe, really, this season. There's not that many top-level centre-backs. So I think it's a little bit difficult to judge. And I would be slightly worried with the fact that he's not a massive shot taker. I think it's about 2.5 per 90. He's not super creative. He doesn't create a chance per 90 either. And he's not really dynamic either. So I feel like unless he can beat a man or operate in those tight spaces like Olivier Giroud did, who was your example earlier, and bring others into play, I don't really see what he's going to really bring to the table, because he might struggle to beat his man in against tighter, more high quality defenses. So I'd be a little bit concerned about his adaptation to the Premier League. But having said that, if he had another season like this and continue to push on, then maybe I'd be a little bit more persuaded.
Yeah, it's certainly always the risk you take with someone that's had one good season. It's very much, it's a big risk. But then also from a selling club's perspective, that player might not be that hot again. So it could be their opportunity to cash in big time. And that takes me on to the next player, Darwin Núñez, 22 years of age, Benfica forward, does play off the left sometimes. He's had what you might call as a breakthrough season. I think 30 goals this season in all competitions. Last season, I think, was 6 or 7. So he certainly stepped up. He scored at Anfield in the Champions League. He's obviously been Benfica's star man. Another one that's been linked with the likes of Chelsea, Man United, Liverpool, etc. Again, similar to the Scamacca thing, this is really his first real season of scoring goals consistently. How do you view his ability and his suitability to a Premier League? Do you think he'll get a move this summer? Because 75 million euros, which is kind of being touted about, that's a lot of money for someone who's still relatively unproven.
Absolutely. I know they rejected, I think it was 50 million euros in January from West Ham as well. So, they've set their stall out that they don't want to sell him for anything less than, as you said, I think it's about 80 million euros. I even saw in the press last week, which was potentially just paper talk, the figure of 100 million euros going around, which just seems absolutely bonkers. But it's been a good pathway from the Premier League to the Premier League in recent years, not just Luis Diaz, but Bruno Fernandes, of course. Ruben Diaz as well at Man City, adapted pretty seamlessly to the league. But they had a little bit more experience under their belt, as you say. Darwin Núñez didn't take a traditional route to the top. He came through Almeria in the Segunda division. I think when Benfica bought him, he was their most expensive, the most expensive player ever to be bought from the Segunda division. But as you say, 34 goals this year, performed in the Champions League, not just against Liverpool, but he scored against Ajax, he scored against Barcelona. These are really top quality sides. But when I watch him, which admittedly isn't that extensively because I don't watch Primera Liga on a regular basis, but he looks like he's a very dynamic box player as well. He picks up good positions. He's very good in the air as well. He's not incredibly tall. He's not incredibly strong, but he seems to have that knack of being in the right place at the right time and can play off the left as well, which does make him a sort of double threat, a little bit more dynamic maybe than a Scamacca who we're just talking about. So I think there's a lot more potential in Darwin Núñez right now than Scamacca. I'd be feeling a lot more confident about a move this summer. But as you say, that price just does seem ridiculous. We saw João Felix go to Atletico Madrid for a huge fee a few years ago, and he's only just beginning to justify it. And even right now, doesn't look like Simeone truly trusts him in his system and doesn't get the minutes that probably his performances deserve, which is partly down to the manager, but might partly be down to the player just not being quite ready. So I'd be very, very wary about spending anything over even £45 million on Darwin Núñez right now. But as I say, a lot of people that watch him on a regular basis do say he's an exceptional talent. Another one coming through, probably not as naturally gifted as Luis Diaz or as silky as Luis Diaz, who, he feels like sort of when you're watching him, it's a bit like the Colombian Neymar at the moment. Like he's a bit of a box of tricks. Darwin Núñez is a bit more of a clunky player and a little bit more like a sort of Mo Salah when he dribbles with the ball. It doesn't look like it comes to him all that naturally. But yeah, super effective in the box and looks like he's got a massive future as well.
I mean, do you think Benfica are going to have to lower their price if they want to cash in this summer? Can you see anyone paying that sort of money for him, considering you see Luis Diaz, who at the moment is arguably a considerably better player than Núñez, going for much less money? I mean, if Benfica are going to sell this summer, they're going to definitely have to reduce that price, because I personally can't see the likes of a Man United, a Chelsea or a Liverpool that he's been linked with paying that much money for him.
Yeah, no, I agree. I can't see any of those clubs doing it. The only club that I could potentially see going a little bit crazy on an attacking player this summer, which has been linked, is Newcastle. Yeah. And you feel like they're going to want to make a statement signing this summer. I mean, just today, they're being linked with Adrian Rabiot from Juventus. They're being linked with Atletico Madrid's Renan Lodi, who will cost between 15 and 20 million pounds, the two of them, not together, each that is. So this would be an enormous outlay, but even Newcastle, I don't think would shell out the 80 million euros on Darwin Núñez, and nor should they really. Yeah. I think a club like West Ham is the right level for him right now, I would argue, despite those Champions League performances. And they'd be foolish not to invest in a striker this year, with Yarmolenko having left already in their sort of, Europa League push falling short a little bit in the Premier League because they didn't have that backup to Mikel Antonio, who went cold for so long. So yeah, Darwin Núñez, I think they'll be hard pressed to get that price they're asking for right now.
And obviously, you touched on Scamacca earlier, saying his skill set might not be so suited. Do you think Darwin Núñez is more robust, got a better skill set and attributes to take to the Premier League kind of more naturally than a Scamacca would?
Yeah, well, he's super aggressive. Like, that's one of his main traits that I see when he's watching him. Like, his determination is through the roof. You often see it with Uruguayan players as well. Luis Suarez, Edinson Cavani, they play football very much on the edge. They're ultra committed, ultra determined to win every ball and compete for every challenge. And Darwin Núñez has got a fair amount of that. So I think if he brings that sort of dogged nature to the Premier League, then he could adapt quite well. But it's just difficult to say with a 22-year-old adapting to a new league, a new country, a new teammates, probably a new system. So there's never any dead certs on transfers, particularly with young players. And I wouldn't want to say for sure whether he'd be able to adapt seamlessly.
Yeah, no, for sure. Again, that's another one to stay tuned across the summer. Just to round out attacking players, then another young, exciting prospect in the Bundesliga. Obviously, Moussa Diaby, 22 years of age, has been at Bayer Leverkusen, been linking up really well with Patrick Schick this season. Obviously, was at PSG's academy. They sold him on. He's looking very good. He's been linked with Newcastle as well. I mean, I think Chelsea personally should maybe be having a look at him with the likes of Timo Werner, etc. Move on. Obviously, Christoph Nkunku has kind of outshone this season him in terms of attacking players in the Bundesliga, but still 12 assists from Moussa Diaby, 22 years of age. The ceiling's quite high for him. Do you think, having been sold by PSG, he's kind of rebuilt himself a little bit? Could the Premier League be right for him this summer? Would Newcastle represent a good move, and would that be kind of the marquee attacking signing they might need?
Yeah, I really, really like Moussa Diaby. Of all the names, attacking players that we're going to mention, I think he's my top option, even though he plays in a separate position to Darwin Núñez or Scamacca. I remember going on Sky last summer. Football Daily are owned by Sky, so we sometimes appear on Sky Sports, and went on there and I thought that Jack Grealish's money from Aston Villa should have been invested in Moussa Diaby rather than Leon Bailey. And I'm not trying to say I'm some sort of Nostradamus because I've got plenty wrong this year. But I think on that occasion, I might well have been right. Although Leon Bailey's been really, really unfortunate with injury as well. But Moussa Diaby, you're so right. The way he's linked up with Patrick Schick, he's such a running threat. He's exceptionally fast. And it's just a bit like Vinicius Junior this year. He seems to have calmed down in front of goal. He's taking a few less touches. He's taking a little bit more time, seemingly. And his finishing has just been absolutely sensational for a Bayer Leverkusen side who under Gerardo Seoane have, looked like they could potentially get in the mix for a trophy next year. Not necessarily the Bundesliga, but, give a good run at the Pokal. They haven't won a trophy since 1993, which for a club of their size with their fan base is not really good enough. Alongside Florian Wirtz as well, who's an excellent player. I highly recommend Premier League fans to get acquainted with Florian Wirtz if you haven't watched a lot of him. He's only 18 as well. Moussa Diaby, slightly older, can play off either flank, excellent finisher, good close control, good dribbler. He's seemingly got it all. The only thing is with the Bundesliga, it's a very open game. It's much more open than the Premier League. It's a lot more counter-attacking, and that does suit fast, nimble attacking players like Jadon Sancho, like Moussa Diaby. So I'd worry that if he went into a system like Chelsea, which is slightly slower, a bit more possession-based, then that could slightly hamper his natural sort of abilities. But everything points towards him having an enormous future. And as you say, so important that he's bounced back from that PSG rejection alongside Nkunku. And they've made PSG kind of look quite stupid.
I mean, you obviously touched on Nkunku there. Obviously, he's had a breakout season. He's been phenomenal at Leipzig this year. Would you say he's a more complete player than Diaby? Because obviously Nkunku's been touted for big money move this summer. Another player that Chelsea are interested in as well. Again, he's one sort of rejected from the PSG system. It's gone to the Bundesliga, kind of rebuilt himself. It's a lot of money, Nkunku, that Leipzig would want. I mean, if you were going between the two, Diaby probably is going to cost a little bit less. I mean, is there much difference between them? I know Nkunku's obviously scored a lot more goals, but
yeah, I mean, he's scored more goals. I think this year it's close to 50 goals and assists Nkunku got for RB Leipzig was really consistent across the entire season, unlike a lot of his teammates. I mean, Jesse Marsch was fired when they were in mid-table, I think, in the Bundesliga in December, and it was under Domenico Tedesco that they got it together, did their Europa League run, and finished really high in the Bundesliga. I mean, it was only fourth, but considering where they were, it could have been a lot worse, and won the Pokal as well, with Nkunku scoring their goal in that. So they've won their first trophy in their history. And Nkunku's been exceptional this year. He's also slightly more versatile than Diaby. He is comfortable playing as a central striker, or at least the focal point of an attack. He's not a physical player per se, but can play centrally, can play off the right. Diaby is much better off the left than he is in any other position. Maybe has a little bit more Champions League experience in Nkunku as well. He got that hat-trick against Man City earlier this year. And I think, although he is going to be expensive, I do believe he's got a release clause, which off the top of my head, I can't exactly remember. I think it might be £55 million, which for a player that seems like he's going to be one of the best players in Europe in a few years' time, seems like a bit of a snip. So if I was Liverpool losing Sadio Mane this summer, I would definitely be looking at Christopher Nkunku, given the fact he can play centrally like Mane did at the end of this year, or off the left as well.
And just on the Bundesliga in general, we see a lot of attacking players make that transition Bundesliga to Premier League with kind of mixed success. I mean, Timo Werner from a Chelsea perspective, I mean, look at him at Leipzig compared to Chelsea. It looks like it's a different player. Again, Jadon Sancho's struggled a bit this season. Kai Havertz, whilst he's had moments at Chelsea, still on a consistent basis has been struggling. Why do you think attacking players particularly struggle to make that transition from the Bundesliga to the Premier League?
It's really difficult to say, but yeah, I agree. In the last few years, there hasn't been so much success, which is a little bit different to the previous 5 years where Bobby Firmino did really well on the back of coming from Hoffenheim. De Bruyne obviously did well coming from Wolfsburg, or did exceptionally well from Wolfsburg. Son Heung-min as well has proven to be an absolute wonder, a sort of star for Spurs for many, many years, and one of the most underrated players in the world. So I don't think it's always the case, but yeah, at the moment, it does seem a little bit strange that players have struggled to adapt. I think the Premier League has more games per season. It's got 4 extra per season, which does make a difference in terms of minutes played. Often German teams don't go as deep in Europe. Prior to this year, they hadn't had a UEFA Cup or Europa League winner since, I think, the early 2000s with Schalke. And very few German teams have progressed deep into the Champions League in recent years, except for Bayern Munich and Leipzig with that run to the semi-finals in 2020. So they play a few less games, and it's just a more open, slightly different style of play, with probably a little bit less control to their games than in the Premier League. And you probably feel that in the Bundesliga, if you get 2 or 3 goals up, maybe the standard of the opposition slightly drops, whereas in the Premier League, it's a much more competitive throughout the entire league. And it feels like there's about 6 or 7 very sides in the bottom of the Premier League that are of a similar-ish standard, whereas in the Bundesliga every year, there's always quite a big disparity between the bottom 2 and the sort of, the mid-table to lower mid-table as well. So obviously there's maybe a little bit of stat padding going on there as well. So I think there's multiple factors, but crucially, all these players that we've just mentioned are also really, really young. Like Havertz, Sancho, they're only going to get better. Diaby and Nkunku, I mean, Nkunku's, I think, 24 or 25, but Diaby would have room to grow as well. And even if these players don't work out to be the players that we all expected them to be, there's still going to be an enormous sell-on value. Like, even if Chelsea decided to sell Havertz, which I don't know why you do, but in a couple of years' time, you'd still expect to fetch at least £40 million, so a £30 million loss or so. And that's if the transfer goes really badly. Whereas lots of the other players you see arriving from separate leagues are a little bit more experienced as well. So, yeah, there's multiple factors at play. And, I think we should definitely give the Bundesliga talents some more time.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, sticking in the Bundesliga, I just wanted to move on to a defender. Again, another player that's been linked with Chelsea quite heavily, and that's Josko Gvardiol of RB Leipzig. Of the 87 players to attempt 40 or more dribbles, Gvardiol had the best dribble success rate, 75.5% in the Bundesliga last season. 20 years of age, Croatian international. He's had a very good season at Leipzig, but again, another one who's this is a little bit of a breakout season. I mean, I personally haven't heard too much about him prior to this season. Versatile, can play centre-back, left-back as well. How good could this guy be? Because he's young still. He looks very impressive. Do you worry that a move to Chelsea this summer potentially would it be too soon? Is he ready?
It could potentially be. Yeah, I think it might be a little bit too soon, just because of the role that Antonio Rudiger played in your defence for so long and how well he played that role. I think there'd be enormous pressure on Gvardiol going to a club like Chelsea. And I think he's also made hints in the media that he might see his future at RB Leipzig for another year, and that's probably a sensible decision. Look, he was exceptional last year. As you say, really versatile, can play in a back three or a back four. He's really physically dominant. And Leipzig had it up against them last summer, selling Kanate, selling Upamecano, selling Sabitzer in midfield, of course, losing Nagelsmann. And to recover and finish in the Champions League and win a trophy is a great achievement. And the players that they brought in to replace those players, the likes of Simakan and Gvardiol, were really young and unproven. So he's done really well. His defensive metrics are through the roof. He's a very solid passer. He carries the ball, as you say, really well. He picks out passes. I remember watching a game, I think it was against Dortmund. And I think Leipzig won 3-1. I think it was in November or December time. And I highly recommend going to watch the highlights of that, because Gvardiol picks out the most outrageous pass over the top to Nkunku, splitting the lines perfectly. And it was at that moment you're just like, this guy's got quite a bit about him. Now, I don't watch him on a weekly basis, but everyone that does that I follow on Twitter or talk to in the sort of footballing community says that this guy has an enormous future, and he's part of a really exciting crop of Croatian talent. I mean, for a nation the size of Croatia, they've really overachieved in the last few years, of course, reaching the World Cup final in 2018, that Modric and Rakitic and Brozovic era. And now they've got obviously Kovacic coming through, Pasalic, they've got Gvardiol, they've got Dusan Šaleta, who's at Marseille. So it's a very exciting time for Croatia and for RB Leipzig. I think he will be quite expensive. I think he was £25 million, I think, last summer. And RB Leipzig know what they're sitting on there, that they could get him, sell him for at least £40 million next year. And I think if they're going to sell one of Nkunku and Gvardiol, they might want to sell Nkunku just because his value is probably at the peak. It might well be, even though that would be an enormous loss to them. But they do have Dani Olmo and Forsberg and players like that who can fill in. Whereas Gvardiol, signing centre-backs in this market, particularly in that age range that they like to operate in, it is really quite difficult. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with him. But I'm not surprised Chelsea are looking at him. He's really, really impressed this year.
And another one that's just coming in the chat, Chao Enrique. If I think I might have pronounced that. I don't know if I pronounced his first name properly. Is he from the Bundesliga? I don't think I've heard too much about him. Is he Bundesliga as well?
I'm actually going to have to hold my hands up. I don't know Chao Enrique.
No, I don't. If RD in the chat, if you could explain who he is, I've got to hold my hands up. I haven't actually heard very much about him. But moving away from the Bundesliga, I just wanted to round out then with a holding midfield player, Ibrahim Sangare, PSV, part of the side that won the Dutch Cup. Very impressive season there. Again, Eredivisie to Premier League, mixed success rate. Some work, some doesn't. He seems to be a bit of a all-round midfielder. Do you think he could be on the move this summer? Is he someone that has got the attributes to succeed in the Premier League, be like that kind of holding midfield player, that sort of enforcer type role? A lot of teams looking for a defensive-minded midfield player, the likes of Man United, Chelsea, to name a couple. How impressed have you been with Sangare?
Yeah, I mean, this is a player that we've been talking about on Football Daily for years. It actually became a bit of a running joke that whenever we were looking for a way for a midfield or a team to fix their midfield, I should say, we'd always link them with Sangare, and Tifo Football did the same thing as well. He was at Toulouse for 4 years, which, given that they were, alternating between Ligue 1 and Ligue 2 at that time and never really high up in Ligue 1, that seemed a little strange. Then he went to PSV. He's done pretty well there. I mean, he's now 24. He's entering his peak. He is a defensive behemoth. I think it's over 6 defensive actions per game. For anyone who's not familiar with that, anything over 3.5 to 4 is really pretty solid. The likes of Wilfred and Didi, I think, is the most active, in the Premier League for defensive midfield actions, and he'd be at a similar number. So we're looking at someone who is operating in an easier league, but bear in mind that PSV probably average around 60% possession. Those have to be taken into account. This team doesn't even, face the opposition with the ball that often. So to, be at close to 7 tackles and interceptions is really pretty impressive. Very dynamic with the ball, as you say. I think he completed over 70% of his dribbles last term, which, given that he's operating in tight midfield spaces with pressing coming onto him, I think that's really impressive as well. I think the best that we've ever seen in central midfield was Moussa Dembele, at least from a statistical point of view, the ex-Spurs player. And I think he used to be around 80%. So Sangare is not that far off that sort of level, at least in his dribbling right now. So, yeah, I think the names you've already mentioned, if Spurs hadn't signed Bentancur permanently, then I'd probably link him with them. But Man United, he'd be excellent for Man United. And a lot cheaper than the players they're currently being linked with in that position. The Declan Rices, the Tchouaménis, who looks like he's now joining Real Madrid as well. So Sangare, excellent player seemingly. ready for a move, I think. And be definitely one that I'd be looking to take advantage of if I was a sporting director in the Premier League.
I think I mentioned price. How much do you think roughly he would cost? I mean, obviously PSV. I mean, it's not going to be like a huge fee, but he's obviously one of their standout players. I'm not going to want to let him go on the cheap. I mean, how much do you think if he's going to move on this summer, PSV would be prepared to accept?
Yeah, well, now I think they see the names probably being linked with him. I mean, the likes of Man United, Liverpool as well are being linked with him if they can't get Tchouaméni. So I think they'll probably ask for 40 and probably get 35, 30 or something like that. I reckon. So yeah, PSV are sitting on a player, and I can't really remember their record departure off the top of my head, but they don't really make money on their players in the same way that Ajax have over the last few years, and it has led to a bit of a disparity in that league. I think Ajax have won 3 of the last 4 league titles. So PSV, this could be massive for them, getting a player like Sangare for massive, massive money, and looking to reinvest it as they look to move forward under a new coach now that Roger Schmidt has left to Benfica.
Yeah, that Enrique apparently is a Monaco left wing back in
French Caio Henrique.
Caio Henrique, yeah, that's the one. I think I butchered the pronunciation of his first name there. He's half decent, is he? Do you think?
Supposedly, yeah. I mean, I can't say I've watched a whole lot of him. No. He's really, really young. I think he came from Brazil. I think it was the season before last. But he was linked quite heavily with Atletico Madrid, I think, in January before they signed Ronaldo from Lille. But yeah, it looks like a very exciting prospect. One to watch more of it.
And just lastly, before we round out, just whilst we're on PSV, another attacking player, quite good promise, Cody Gakpo. He's been linked with Liverpool from when I last seen. I don't know an awful lot about him. Is he an exciting prospect?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's really versatile, can play on either flank and through the middle as well. Quite rangy. I don't know whether he's probably got the physicality right now in his game, just judging from afar, to instantly hit the ground running in the Premier League. I'd probably want him to put a bit more beef on over the summer before any move. But yeah, very exciting finisher as well. Kind of reminds me a bit of Calvin Stengs, who was at AZ Alkmaar, who went to Nice last summer, who looked like a really exciting player, but then hasn't really hit the ground running at Nice. So as you say, it's been up and down from the Eredivisie in terms of instant success in the Premier League in recent years. I always remember Jahan Bash, who went to Brighton, who'd been absolutely smashing it in the Eredivisie and just never really reproduced as well. We've seen Donny van der Beek struggle for game time and consistency at not just Man United now, but also Everton as well. Yeah. But it'll be exciting to see what he can do under Erik ten Hag next year. But Cody Gakpo, worth keeping an eye on. But again, I think I would be reluctant to spend anything over £25 million on him at the moment.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that sounds like a good place to round out. If people want to check out more of what you do, obviously you're on with the Football Daily lads. Obviously, check those channels out. And for yourself, like social media, Twitter, best place to find you? Yeah,
it's just Dougie Critchley on Twitter, Instagram. I've even started a TikTok recently. Oh. Still getting to grips with that bit of a granddad, really. But go check out all those. And mainly go check out Euro Football Daily, and Football Daily Podcast, where I feature, pretty regularly alongside, it's about 6 or 7 regular presenters.
Now, perfect. Guys, make sure you go and check all of that out. I've linked it all in the description below. Dougie, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it as always. Great to chat about something a little bit different, European players that could be on the move. Guys, for myself, we passed the 500 subscribers mark a couple of days ago. So thank you so much for all your support. And hopefully, we're on the road to 1K now. Let's get there as quickly as possible. So do smash a like on this stream and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for getting involved in the chat. And I'll catch you again tomorrow with another stream. But until then, guys, take care. Cheers.